Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Blurred Lines, Crime, Conspiracy, and the Truth Behind the Gossip. I'm your host, Ashley, and today we are getting into something that is, I have to give another trigger warning. I apologize for all of this content that has trigger warnings, but unfortunately, again, we do have a content warning. This episode contains discussions of domestic violence, murder, and the death of children. So if you or someone you know is in a domestic violence situation, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. And this is available 24/7, or you can text BEGIN, BEGIN, to 88788. So please listen to the following episode with care. Thank you, guys. Welcome back to Blurred Lines, Crime, Conspiracy, and the Truth Behind the Gossip. So before we get into the episode today, I just want to go over a few updates. And of course, I want to thank everyone for listening. I've had so many new listeners, and I've had so many new listens over the past month. So I just want to give my gratitude, because this is my passion project. This is what I love doing, and I want to continue giving it to you guys, and I want to be able to expand as much as I possibly can. Be sure to rate this episode and any episodes you guys listen to, as well as leave a review for the podcast. It does help me immensely. Also, I'd like to let you guys know I did start my Patreon. You guys can find it linked below in all of the show notes going forward. You get episodes with no ads, and we will start community chats as well. And I will be uploading more episodes as I have them. And soon, probably starting within the next month or so, you will be able to get episodes a day ahead of time as well. So instead of waiting till Friday, you'll have them available on Thursday, and they will be ad-free if you subscribe to the Patreon. I want to thank the 2 followers that did follow me on Patreon. They are free followers, but they matter just as much. Earth Sorcerer and Bien Live. I believe they are people from my TikTok, so thank you guys so much. Again, everything will be linked down below if you guys need any assistance in that. So today's case is one that people think already understand, and we've seen all the documentaries, we've seen the body cam footage, and unfortunately, we know the ending. But this case isn't just about what had happened during one evening. It's about what happens behind closed doors long before anyone noticed. I wanted to do an episode this week because when you guys are listening to this, it's Friday the 13th. So happy Friday the 13th, first of all. Second of all, tomorrow, the day after you guys are listening to this on Saturday, is Valentine's Day. So I wanted to do kind of like a love triangle. So we are going to be sharing the story of Shanann Watts, her daughters Bella and Celeste, and her unborn son Nico, and the man who murdered them, her husband, the father, and someone who was supposed to love his family, Chris Watts. We're also going to talk about what came after the arrest and the prison letters. We're also going to get into some of the confessions that kept changing, including the more recent ones, and how this case perfectly represents the blurred lines between image and reality. Now, this is basically about how love can look differently on the outside versus the inside. To the world, Shanann Watts and Chris Watts were a perfect couple that had a fairy tale life, a fairy tale marriage, and everything seemed perfect. But unfortunately, those lines do get blurry, and unfortunately, reality isn't everything that we show online. Now, Shanann Watts was more than a headline. Now, I want to be clear, Shanann Watts and Chris Watts both had their faults. They both had some relationship issues, and they both, had some things that they needed to work through. But it does not equal, let me get rid of my daughter and wife. Somehow, in this case, especially, people have tried to turn normal human flaws into justification, and that's something we need to shut down right now. Shanann was 34 years old, and she was a mother who loved loudly. She shared her life online, the good and the messy and the vulnerable. Now, Chris Watts and Shanann met in 2012 and married 2 years later. They had 2 daughters together, Bella, who was born in 2013, and Celeste, who was born in 2015. They lived in a 5-bedroom home in Frederick, Colorado, worth about $400,000. Watts was employed by Anadarko Petroleum, and Shanann was a sales representative at a multi-marketing company called Lavelle. In 2015, the company sought Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection, claiming that they had liabilities totaling nearly $450,000. The Watts had a combined income of about $100,000. At the time of her death, Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with her son they had named Nico Lee Watts. Again, she was about 15 weeks pregnant. Now, their marriage was clearly struggling, but Shanann truly believed that they were going to fix things. During this time, Shanann had taken a trip out to her parents' home, and she was just really struggling with keeping her marriage together. And to all accounts, they still were trying to work through things. She made decisions based upon the fact that her marriage was going through something, and she wanted to fix it for not only herself, but also her children. But unfortunately, she did not know her husband had already made a decision for the family. Chris Watts didn't stand out at all. That's what makes him so unsettling in this case. He was completely quiet. He was compliant, and he never raised his voice. People described him as the kind of guy who just went along with whatever was happening. But passively doesn't mean harmless. By 2018, Chris had started changing, losing weight, working out, becoming more confident, and that change wasn't about self-improvement. It was actually about another woman. Now, Watts had been having an affair with a co-worker, Nicole Kishinger, who was unaware that he was still married and cooperating with police in the investigation. Watts originally denied knowing the whereabouts of his wife and daughters, but later confessed to killing Shanann, saying that he had asked for a divorce, and in a fit of rage, she had killed the girls. Then he, in a similar emotional state, killed Shanann. However, Watts eventually admitted to killing his daughters by smothering them with a blanket on November 6, 2018. Chris met, as I stated, Nicole Kessinger at work earlier that year. It was just a casual affair. Now, this wasn't just a casual affair. It was intense. They were constantly texting, and they had long phone calls talking about their future together. Nicole even searched Shanann's Facebook. She looked up wedding dresses, and she even Googled, "Man I'm having an affair with says he'll leave his wife," quote unquote. Chris told her he was separating from Shanann, but he wasn't. He was telling Shanann that he would work on their marriage and be there for her and the girls, as well as their new baby they just found out that they were having. Meanwhile, Shanann was at home. She was pregnant, caring for the kids, sensing emotional distance, but still trying to save her marriage. Later on, Chris admitted something chilling. He said his family began to feel like an obstacle. That's when the line was crossed. On August 13th, 2018, the night that everything ended, Shanann got home just before 2 a.m. after a business trip. She was exhausted, she had a doctor's appointment that morning, and she was emotionally overwhelmed. Chris would later change his story multiple times, as we stated, but here's what matters. In later confession, Chris mentions he knew he was going to kill her. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't an argument gone wrong like he had claimed before. He strangled Shanann in their bed. No signs of struggle, no chance to fight back. And then came the part that somehow got even worse. His children. He later admitted at first Chris claimed the girls were killed at the oil site where eventually he dumped Shanann's body and put the girls in it was like a holding tank, I guess. But that wasn't true. Years later, in letters from prison, which is what we're going to get into here shortly, he admitted something far more disturbing. He said he attempted to kill Bella and Celeste at home, believing they were dead. They weren't. They actually woke back up in the truck. Chris then loaded Shanann's body into his truck and placed his living children in the backseat with her. Bella asked questions and Cece cried. Bella watched her sister die first. And still, Chris continued. Those details never came out in court. They came later, when he no longer had anything to lose. Those are things that were not claimed in court. That was stuff from a letter that he ended up writing to someone, and basically he had stated that he knew that God had forgiven him, that it was time for him to tell his truth. But I'm sorry, Chris, God has not forgiven you for killing your children. It just hasn't. Period. Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson knew something was wrong almost immediately. She pushed for a welfare check, and that likely changed completely everything. The body cam footage tells its own story. Chris was pacing, he was smiling at the wrong moments, and he was pleading for his family to come home, while knowing exactly where they were at. Investigators noticed the inconsistencies. The neighbor's security footage sealed it. Within days, Chris had confessed. So this was security footage that, I don't know if you guys remember it, but it was kind of blurry. And they did this whole security footage where you can see him pull out the truck and you can see him going in. But this security footage is actually very controversial just because they believe that there was a second person there, and they believe it was Nicole because she was searching Shanann's Facebook page. She knew about this. She had found out without him telling her. So there was something that was definitely wrong, and she felt it. And I think that if it wasn't for her not just like up and leaving, I don't think he would have did this. I think this was an obstacle that he needed to get out of the way. Now, Watts revealed to the police the location of the bodies on August 16th. They were on a property of his former employer, Anadarko Petroleum. Watts was fired after his arrest on August 15th. Shanann and Nico were buried in a shallow grave, and the two girls' bodies had been hidden in oil tanks. On August 21st, Watts was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. He received 2 counts of first-degree murder for each daughter because they were under the age of 12, and he was in a position of trust. Watts was also charged with the unlawful termination of pregnancy and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. He was released on a $5 million bail. Watts pleaded guilty to the 3 murders on November 6th. The death penalty was not an option in this case because Shanann's family did not want another killing to occur. On November 19th, Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences, 3 consecutive and 2 concurrent, without the possibility of parole. He received an additional 48 years for terminating Shanann's pregnancy and 36 years for tampering with a deceased body. After his sentencing, his bail was revoked and he was taken into custody. Into the mid-2020s, he was serving his life sentence at the Dodge Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Waupun, Wisconsin. I hope I'm saying that right. In a 5-hour follow-up interview with investigators, Chris said that he strangled Shanann after fighting about his wish to separate. While he was attempting to bring Shanann's body downstairs, the girls woke up and saw him. He smothered the girls individually with a blanket, and that was in his truck, and then disposed of 3 bodies. The Watts family murders have been subject of many media accounts, which include interviews with Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandra Rezkik, and an interview with Nicole Kessinger. On January 26, 2020, the Lifetime Network released Chris Watts' Confessions of a Killer as part of the Ripped from the Headlines feature film. However, Shanann's family criticized the film, saying that they had not been consulted and were not aware of it until it was already in production. Sounds like Lifetime, right? They said the film was inaccurate and feared that it would increase the online harassment they had received since Shanann's murder. Then on September 30th of 2020, Netflix released American Murder: The Family Next Door, a documentary about the Watts family that includes home movies, text messages, and social media posts. Several additional media portrayals of the Watts family murders, such as in 2022 Suburban Nightmare, Chris Watts, have been released. Isn't that interesting that Lifetime didn't consult, just like they did with like the Idaho 4 murders and all of the other things they don't consult about? That's pretty crazy, right? Yeah. So I also want to remind you in this case that Shanann Watts she was reported missing initially, and her friend Nicole Atkinson, who I believe this was the woman that actually had dropped her off the night before from their work trip, had reported her missing because it wasn't normal to not hear from her, especially knowing that her and Chris were already fighting before she had got home. She was very worried about this, and she had called family and everybody, so she decided, you know what, I'm just going to call the police. And if she hadn't have had done that, I think that he would have got away with a lot of this because they wouldn't have located things. But at the same time, he was having an affair. He was openly having an affair, texting this woman, seeing this woman, and building fantasy life while his wife was taking care of his children and pregnant with his other child and trying to keep their marriage together. If you guys haven't watched some of the documentaries like the one on Netflix, definitely go and watch it. You see some of the text messages between Shanann and Chris, and you see the dynamic they had, and you see how really he really wasn't that amazing of a guy. Like, Shanann had this glow about her. Even her girls were just so bright and bubbly, and they seemed like they were full of life. And then you had this guy that was just like there. Like, I don't know. Very calculated, in my opinion. I think that he knew that the only way he was going to leave her with, which I don't think that this was logical. I think he kind of knew, well, she's pregnant. She's not going to just up and leave me without me just saying, hey, I'm cheating on you. He knew that he would have to get rid of her. And I don't think that it was part of his plan, in my opinion, to get rid of the girls. But I think the minute they woke up and they saw that their mom, saw that scene, and I can only imagine how horrific that was to see their father taking their mother downstairs, probably like wrapped in a blanket, or not her walking herself downstairs. You know what I mean? Like, that has to be super scary. And to think about the horror that they most likely lived in those hours, and driving there and crying and asking, like, what's wrong with mommy? Like, is she okay? I want to see her. And to think that she hadn't seen her kids, because remember, she had gotten home from a work trip that she was doing, and she hadn't seen her kids. The girls hadn't seen her. I'm sure they woke up because they wanted to see their mother. Now, after his sentencing, he found religion, as I stated. He says that God forgave him, and he began writing letters, and he began talking to more people. Now, some see that he has remorse, others see another form of control that's going on, but every new detail only confirms one thing. This was very calculated. I wanted to kind of bring that forward too, because he has wrote a lot of letters to women. This is kind of similar to the Wade Wilson thing. Chris Watts was one of them that a lot of women saw, and they're like, oh, I'm going to fix him. You know what I mean? Like those type of women, like the Ash Trevinos of the world that date men that are never getting out of prison. Yeah. Like the Wade wives, exactly like the Wade wives, which we talked about last week. So go and check out that episode. It's very telling, and a lot of people just say it's because he has nothing to do behind bars. But at the same time, it's like there has to be a line crossed to where talking to people like this is not okay. You know what I mean? He is in a maximum security prison. He is in protective custody. He does work as a janitor. He like mops the floors and probably takes out the trash and stuff. And yeah, that will be for the rest of his life, for killing his wife, his unborn son, and his 2 daughters. Now, this case sits at the heart of what Blurred Lines is about. The gap between how things look and what actually happens. Shanann Watts trusted her husband. Bella and Celeste trusted their father. And that betrayal is the most disturbing part of this whole story. Now, again, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, you are definitely not alone in that. You can contact the domestic violence hotline, and that's at 1-800-799-7233, or you can text BEGIN, BEGIN, to 88788. There is always somebody there to help, and I hope you know you're not alone. And this further proves to a lot of people as well that sometimes it is the people that you love the most that will hurt you the most. Thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe and do a review wherever you're listening to this. And I'll see you guys next week with a brand new Blurred Lines episode. We'll talk about it next time. Bye, guys.